Lucas, watching the Arthur episode that we just did for this podcast and reading the description of this episode, I know that it might feel like there's less to be positive about, but let's put a positive spin on it, because I think there's a couple of things that we can be pretty darn happy about here. I mean, first of all, here we are for another episode of Elwood City Limits, the episodic Arthur podcast. We've been doing this for quite a long time, and it's always fun, even if the episode itself that we're talking about, is good or bad.
Sometimes it's more fun when the episode's bad.
It's true. I also have, I teased this in the last episode, and so I want to start off with a bit of good news. I was wondering, should I say this now? Should I say this later? But I think I'm going to say it now to get in front of everything. Lucas, I can confirm that this episode that we are going to talk about, this last episode of Season 21, this is the last dog and baby episode of the series.
Oh, my goodness, Will. Well, now I'm looking... I wish I knew this before watching this episode. I think I would look at it with a whole new light. Okay, wow. I'm almost rendered speechless by that information, Will. I'd like to thank the Elwood City Limits faithful for sticking with us through these challenging times.
Yeah.
I want to thank my parents for teaching me the value of good hard work and perseverance that allowed me to push through all these terrible dog and baby episodes. And finally, I'd like to thank PBS and Mark Brown for putting us out of our misery and not including any more dog and baby episodes in the remainder of the Arthur series.
Agreed. And we can finally put this to rest, one of our least favorite types of Arthur episodes, but it is a double one, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But like I say, there's a few more things to be happy about, namely, Will Young here, by the way, and my co-host is Lucas Mancini. We've got a lot of emails to answer before we get to this episode, so we can put it off for even longer, because there have been quite a few emails that have come to us, elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com, after a little bit of radio silence on them. So let's hear what you listeners have to say to us. Lucas, our first email comes in from Serena. Dear Will and Lucas, hi, my name is Serena. I've been listening to the podcast for a little more than 3 years now. I'm writing my first email to you guys because I've been waiting a while to talk about Arthur Takes a Stand, which is probably one of my top 5 favorite episodes. High praise for a later season episode, but it 100% deserves it. Arthur has remained among my favorite shows since preschool, and my passion for politics is just as big, and I loved seeing these intersect. PBS is awesome and brave for airing such a political episode, and also committing to that stance during the Black Lives Matter protests with the anti-racism short. The main character being Arthur in this episode is also an interesting choice. As the titular character, he's kind of a blank slate, not that he doesn't have characterization, so he relates to every kid watching. Here we see him stand firm in his beliefs of right and wrong. He low-key acts as Mrs. McGrady's personal union representative at the age of 8. He's so cool for that. I hope this inspired kids watching to rectify injustices they see, even small ones, because I know it definitely had that impact on me now. I want to go directly into our next email because it also has to do with Arthur Takes a Stand. It's from a patron of ours. That would be Kevin Noon. Hey, Will and Lucas, just listened to your episode on Arthur Takes a Stand. I have some thoughts. I teach 3rd grade special education in New York City, and we just finished our school year with a unit on the civil rights and protest movements, so this episode came at a very apt time. I loved your discussion on the Word With Us Kids segment, and that they could discuss topics like racism and segregation frankly. When my school taught this topic, we were able to discuss the specific causes post-slavery that led to the civil rights movement in America and the white supremacy movement in America. And when kids asked what white supremacy meant, I told them what it was and that it was fundamentally unacceptable back then and now. I think the biggest disservice that adults do is when they think that kids can't handle these kinds of topics, so they dance around it by saying things were unfair for no clear reason. I appreciate that this Arthur episode was pretty direct with methods of protest and how civil disobedience is effectively used. Keep up the great work, and I hope you both have great summers. Thank you from Serena and Kevin. Well, Lucas, a lot of people resonating with the Arthur Takes a Stand episode for obvious reasons, as we kind of spoke about. And I also find it interesting, quite a few teachers that are listeners of this podcast, which I'm always happy to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense given that it's an educational program. You would be passionate about education.
Was really happy to hear that you all responded not just well to our podcast episode, but to Arthur Takes a Stand as well, which is generally considered one of the more well-known and well-received episodes later in the show's lifespan. Our next one comes from Trey. Are you guys aware of YouTuber Matt Neff? If so, what's your guys' opinion on his FUDW series? Or did you choose to ignore it because you famously stan DW? He also roasts other Arthur characters if they're more your preference. So, per this email, I did take a look at an FUDW video or two. Now, I kind of steered away from this because, as Trey famously says, we do stand DW on this podcast. We are big DW boosters, and I wasn't really interested in a video series that was the sole reason was to throw the middle finger up at DW. But I did watch a couple of episodes, and they're pretty funny. So, and not nearly as seriously as I feared it might be. So it's all in good fun. I also watched one of the episodes about Francine, who earlier season Francine deserves a little bit of a talking to, but DW does sometimes as well. But yeah, that's Matt Neff on YouTube. Pretty good videos.
I've never heard of Matt Neff, but I am checking out his channel right now, and I have to say, I am a little bit morbidly curious about some of these videos. We have DW being a whiny brat for 3 hours, FUDW supercut.
Yeah.
Muffy ruins Cinco de Mayo. 5 awful cartoon characters who aren't DW. And Francine ruins the school play. Oh, DW craps the bed. Is this a YouTube poop? This cannot be canon.
Yeah.
I have to say, I am morbidly curious. Now, I don't know what I think about when I look at Mr. No offense to Mr. Neff, and not to bully someone based off their appearance, but he's got quite the face going on in this YouTube profile picture here. Well, so I'm not sure what to think of that, but I am curious. I might have to take a dive into some of these videos here.
They're pretty funny. The only thing is that, and this is really personal preference, it was very distracting in a weird way for like Arthur and adult language, so that, you know, he swears a bit in the videos, which is fine, but it's something that, Lucas, you and I decided not to do early on, or at least to stay away from, yes, to appeal to a broad range of ages, but also it just kind of feels weird to be talking about a children's cartoon and to be swearing a lot. Like, we did that in the first episode, and then when we were done, we were like, yeah, let's not do that. That felt weird. So it also feels weird to listen to. But all the best to Matt Neff. Check out FUDW on YouTube if you like. Finally, email here from Carter Loggy. And Carter, I just edited this down a little bit, but there was something I wanted to put out there from what you emailed us. Carter says, did you know Michael Yarmish, along with Danny Brochu and Melissa Altro, so the voice actors for Arthur, Buster, and Muffy, might be in an upcoming TV movie called Christmas Bells? You should check that out on IMDb. I'm excited for you guys to talk about this episode that we're talking about and the shorter seasons soon. Well, thank you, Carter. So Christmas Bells, I mean, I'm sure many of our listeners know this, Lucas, but there is a cottage industry in various parts of Canada for Christmas movies. You can make a real good living on Christmas movies.
Yes, a close friend of mine works as like a gaffer for some of those productions here in Nova Scotia. Like, he was telling me in the middle of July, he was spending his weekends putting up Christmas lights because he was working on those movies.
So yes, looking on IMDb, it looks like those three are going to be in this movie, along with the star is Maria Bamford. Here's the plot summary. When Amanda returns home for the holidays to help with a friend's wedding plans, she finds more than she expected when an old flame shows up to help ring in Christmas. Might have to seek this one out. 2 hours and 25 minutes. Are you crazy? That can't.
What a saga.
That can't be right. Okay.
It needed that time for that story to be told, Will.
We'll have to keep our eyes open for Christmas Bells. If anybody knows where we can watch it at some point, let us know. But thanks a lot for everybody for emailing in. elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. I'll tell you something else that makes us smile, and that is patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits, especially when we get to talk about a show that we really like. For this month, don't forget that, well, I should say for the month of June, the Patreon offering was an episode of ECL Origins all about Smiling Friends, the Adult Swim cartoon. We had a really fun time talking about Smiling Friends, and I think you'll enjoy it too, especially if you're as big as fans as we are. So check that out if you're a patron. Remember, you can sign up and pay what you want to get access to all of our extra podcasts, as well as access to the ECL Discord, and you also get a shout-out, like I'm going to do right here, right now, for our continued patrons. So we want to say thank you to patrons like Light Relentless, Stella, Riley Stevens, William Moore, Peebs and Marlo Stanfield, Hannah Lee, Michelle Sprzinski, Kevizard Edits, Kirsten, Kelly Corbett, Lauren Rodriguez, Richard Mortimer, Ash, Crimson Vision, Derek Watson Jr., Tiki Barber Fan, Marco, and Perry and Vonnie G. Thank you to Ashmita and Biblio, and thank you to Kayla Ginsberg and Chris Tarr. Patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits will let you know what the next episode is going to be for July at the end of this podcast. And now it's time to wrap it up. Lucas, Arthur Season 21 ends as we start with Invasion of the Soccer Fans. And now this cold open is actually a repeat from a previous bit. That would be Mashed Peas Theater, hosted by Baby Kate and Pal. So I was like, oh, have they ever done a Masterpiece Theater parody before? They have. They've done this exact same thing in Baby Kate and the Imaginary Mystery. So Masterpiece Theater, one of PBS's cornerstone presentations, usually presentations of plays, or sometimes just shows from England. Like Sherlock, I think, was presented as Masterpiece Theater. And it's this very refined presentation of this episode you're about to watch, and they talk about a bizarre ritual involving TV that we're going to get into.
I will have to say that I try to meet all these Arthur episodes on their own merits, and I'm like, okay, dog and baby time, but Invasion of the Soccer Fans, it's a compelling kind of title, and I was like, okay, let's see what we're getting into here. Did not instill confidence in me to start with this kind of back and forth Pal and Kate quote-unquote comedy where we gotta have Pal Kate's trying to set the scene, and then Pal kind of keeps interrupting with these like dog non sequiturs,
or he puts on like hypnosis glasses or something. Yeah, it's just that. So hey, this is the last time we'll ever talk about him. If you're starting on this episode, I'd be very surprised, but as we've said in the past, the dog and baby episodes, the episodes about Kate and Pal where they can talk, just not our thing, because a lot of times they end up being, well, as you said, Lucas, first of all, just kind of not very funny. And it is definitely one of those episodes or episode types that's geared towards a much younger audience than I think even the average Arthur fan who would be watching it. And as we have also said before many times, it can start to feel a bit like the PBS version of Rugrats, which I don't want that. I don't think anybody wants that.
No, Rugrats is Rugrats, and you're not going to beat Rugrats at their own game. There's even other shows that kind of try to, like, a lot of the PBS shows we've watched are toddler characters, talking animal characters, but the dog and baby episodes, they're Arthur trying to capture a younger audience, and it turns out that regular Arthur is fine for capturing the younger audience. In fact, they were already kind of doing it with the DW preschool episodes. I far prefer those. I'd rather see the hijinks of DW, Emily, and the Tibble twins over the dog and babies any day. I guess the worst thing you could say about them is that they just don't really feel like Arthur. They feel like sort of a C-tier PBS show.
Well, and we've spoken before about like the characterization of Pal who can talk is all wrong, and I disliked it from the start when we like way back in this podcast history when Pal started to talk. I was like, this doesn't feel right, and it never has. So it's just always starting on the back foot, these episodes. So like Lucas said, this bizarre ritual about TV turns out to be about soccer because the Molinas, remember the Molinas? They're coming over to watch the Crown City Cobras versus the Sherwood Sharks in the women's soccer semifinals. So cool that they're supporting women's sport. I appreciate that. So we've got our cast that we're going to be dealing with. We've got Pal and Kate, and we have the Molina's dog, Amigo, and we have Grandma Thora's dog, Killer, who is... I'm pleased that they haven't forgotten about Killer, but I also don't have many strong feelings towards her. So those four are very confused about what's happening. They see everybody dressed up in garish colors. They have the banners and the posters for Crown City Cobras around the living room. By the way, I like the Cobras logo design. It's this snake with a crown, and it's kind of twisted up into like a royal emblem, and its color is purple. I like it.
There's a lot of things I like about this. The detail that, Elwood City is not big enough to have an MLS team, but the nearby Crown City, the major metropolitan area, is. Elwood City has the Grebes, but we don't know if that is kind of a Major League Baseball team or are they playing at a lower level. So I like this idea of, the folks are cheering for the next city over. I also thought the timing of this episode was a little bit of art imitating life. We've just had multiple different playoffs, both in the NBA and the NHL, and I myself got caught up a little bit in the kind of Edmonton Oilers fever, Will. I hopped on the bandwagon because it was going to be a newfound chance for a Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup in years and years and years. And of course, we're a long ways from Edmonton. In fact, we're probably closer to a lot of places in the United States than Edmonton, but you get caught up in the storyline, and you see here all these Elwood City residents are staunch Crown City Cobras fans. So I thought this was like a good piece, whether intended or not, of reality injected into this.
Yeah, well observed. I couldn't help but think here, going back to Killer for a second. With them all hanging around, of course, we know that Kate can talk to the dogs and the dogs can talk to Kate, so they're all friendly. But in a world where the dogs are dogs and the babies can't talk, I wouldn't want Kate next to three dogs of that size, especially Killer, who we've seen in a couple of episodes has kind of a mean streak. So I don't know exactly what Mom and Dad Reed are thinking, just plopping her next to the dogs, but I mean, they must have a great deal of trust in all of them.
Well, that's the thing. It depends on the dogs. There's dogs that are reactive in certain ways, but would never be reacted to a baby, and so it really depends on the dog and the situation. And here I am going to have with egg on my face because I'm defending the three dogs here and saying it's fine for three dogs to be hanging out with a baby. But later on in this episode, the dogs are deeply misbehaved to the point where I was like, wow, this is probably the most annoying the dogs that Arthur have ever been. If what takes place later on in this episode took place in my real life, I'd be like, well, these people need to get a handle on their dogs.
Yeah.
Perhaps you are inferring that, Will, with kind of, you have the knowledge of what's about to take place. And in that case, if I saw that, maybe I would think twice about having the baby nearby. But again, we've had this conversation before about Pal and Kate, and I think that generally speaking, most domesticated dogs are really good with infants, and I feel like they just have the knowledge that, okay, this is it's like if you ever see a dog play with an egg and they don't break it.
Yeah.
They kind of have this inherent knowledge that, okay, the baby is a sensitive thing and it must be dealt with delicately. There's always exceptions to the rules, and of course, there's pit bulls who eat babies or whatever. I guess that's the meme.
Yeah.
So it depends on the dog. Though I will say, I'm setting myself up to look foolish given what happens later on in this episode.
Well, so we put a separation here between the dogs and Kate because Kate becomes transfixed, hypnotized even by the soccer that is going on TV, which everybody else, all the human, quote-unquote human characters, are they're all staring at the television. Then Kate starts to enjoy it as well, and she can't quite control herself. This concerns the dogs. Pal momentarily breaks the spell on Kate by licking her, but she gets distracted almost immediately after, this time by the Crown City mascot, which is like a giant snake man. So the dogs feel that this is dangerous somehow, that the television is hypnotizing Kate. So they try and do several things to break the spell, such as it is. So they try barking, but this annoys everybody, and that they are left in the kitchen. Then the dogs find their way outside, work their way around to the front door, and then when they are let in, they steal the remote. And they think they get away scot-free. They, in this whole scene, they trample over the food, and then they accidentally track to where their hiding place is, which is under the table. Mr. Molina mentions that his son Alberto is at the game, and he tries to get a picture of him in the stands at the game. Alberto brought his vuvuzela, which, man, when did that World Cup happen? That had to have been almost 10 years ago, right? If not more.
Oh, I think the vuvuzela one, oh man, and I know we have soccer fans in the audience, so they're going to be correcting us. But wasn't it the one with that Shakira song that's like da 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 da, okay, da 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 da, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
the Africa one.
Waka Waka.
Yeah. I feel like that was the vuvuzela year. I also want to mention the snake mascot. Okay.
Yes.
Lucky the Cobra.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm talking about. A couple episodes ago, we were talking about Rapti, how lazy Rapti is. How he's not kind of imbued with any sort of character or characterization. Instead, this is to look to an example of, okay, we have a quick throwaway kind of character. The Crown City Cobras have to have a mascot. And the 30 seconds, probably less than that we see Lucky, of like, this guy's awesome. This guy's great. And so it goes to show that there's an ability to have a throwaway character, or even kind of a side character, because we might see Rapti again, that could be a little bit more creative than, say, Rapti.
Sure, absolutely. And there's a reason why Kate gets so focused on the mascot. Good catch with the name. I think I must have missed that. So the dogs are discovered under the table. This time they are left outside. Again, the confidence that they have in their dogs, they don't leash them up outside. They're just like, put them in the backyard and be like, and stay out, and that's it. And I was just a little worried of, like, again, if these were real dogs, you've got an open backyard, there are plenty of places for them to run away. Anyway, like, it's like, we're dealing with magic dogs here, so it's all fine, but just wanted to say.
Again, it depends on how much the dogs are trained. There's certain dogs that would not run away if there was an open backyard. And we have more insight and knowledge than the characters in this episode, I suppose, because if there's just any dogs, if I went to a friend's house and this was the setup, I wouldn't be too perturbed, because some people's dogs are so well trained they wouldn't run out.
Sure.
But we see what these dogs end up doing.
Right. So they're trying to peek in through the window, and then there's also a storm that is threatening to happen. It's like, leaving your dogs out in a storm, okay. But Arthur does have the idea that we should let them back in. So the storm very briefly knocks out the power, and the TV goes off. While the power is out, Dad accidentally kind of steps into the power cord of the TV, and then the power comes back on, but the TV doesn't come back on, and everybody was like, well, what happened? And it's just like, I was literally like, are they stupid? Like, nobody would check that? Come on.
Yeah, this whole series of events, the running out with the food and the remote and the power coming off and the unplugging the TV, I was just displeased. I would be. I was putting myself in these characters' shoes, and it's the big game, And I'm not the biggest sports fan in the world, Will, but I have love for the big game, those big game moments, especially a kind of a watch party like this where you get everybody together, we're all invested.
It's communal.
You get snacks. And the idea of 3 dogs turning over the table, unplugging the TV.
Well, unplugging the TV wasn't their fault, though. That was Dad's fault.
It was Dad's fault, but the ruckus. The ruckus is inexcusable as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and you, of the two of us, are more of the dog owner, so you have more experience with canine hijinks than I do. This is the point where Pal sees how sad everyone is when they can't watch the game, so he decides to relent. He alerts Arthur to the unplugged cord, and they plug the TV back in. But now, Kate, the spell has been broken. She didn't watch the TV for long enough, and now she's more content to watch everyone watching the game in their colors and T-shirts and yelling at the screen and everything. So that's what's most entertaining to her. Something.
And I just got to say, and I like soccer. I say this with love. Football, as our European fans would call it. But I have to say, they are lucky they were watching soccer, because it doesn't seem like they missed anything.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Only in soccer would they be like, oh, and now the one goal of the game is taking place. And so we kind of just missed them kicking around. Yeah,
and that amount of time, like if they were watching an NBA game or something, they would have missed like 10 or 15 points.
If they were watching a UFC fight, they could have missed, there's many other sports where this would have been a travesty to have this much, screen off time. Soccer might be the one where they're like, they could breathe a sigh of relief.
And now a word from us kids.
And now a word from us kids.
This is a class of kids who, just like Arthur was watching a sport, they're watching a sport. But it's not a sport like on TV. Instead, another class made a video, a sports coverage style video of a game called Trash Ball, which is just basketball, but instead of a net, there's a trash can.
Well, and are they using a basketball? I don't think they have to dribble either.
I don't know. No, it's not a basketball. It seemed to be something that could fit into one child's hand. So it's smaller than that.
They could travel with it. So it's like handball, but you could walk with the ball, and you got to get over the center line.
Yeah.
And then they use the trash can. I have to say, for such a pedestrian kind of opening episode, Invasion of the Soccer Fans, I was like, okay, they're going to go to some little kids' soccer camp, or they're going to go to some recess where the kids are playing soccer.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the word from us kids. Instead, it's pretty high concept. Not only are they playing a game that the kids made up, but the conceit of this Word From Us Kids segment is that it's a show within the show where it's this documentary that the kids are making about their own game. Pretty interesting. I was like, this is weirdly... sometimes the Word From Us Kids, it's so tangentially related to what the episode is about. And this was one where I was like, well, obviously they're just going to show some kids playing soccer. It's the easiest thing in the world to get footage of. So this game was quite a surprise, and I would say a welcome surprise, because I was like, what am I looking at here? Trash Ball? What are the two teams named? There was the Crushers, and then they were like Trash Dusters?
Or something. It was the Crushers and the... I don't know, the Smashers or something. They were really close to each other.
Well, but also one of them was a whole other syllable longer. And so when the two opposing sides are chanting for their respective teams, the one that was the Trash Dumpers, it was a lot more of an awkward chant because it didn't roll off the tongue the same way. Anyway, they picked the right kids to host this. I thought this was pretty delightful, all things considered.
Yeah, this was all right. I mean, it was like you said, it's neat to have this little presentation of one of kids acting like the sports anchor. I also want to give a big kudos here to the team that edits these Word From Us Kids segments, because you see them they are obviously working with the footage that the team that would have captured on camera. So they're using all these teleprompter style graphics, and they're also keeping the teams straight. So they're like, these kids are on this team and these kids are on this team. I'm like, dude, that must have taken so long for them to get correct and to do accurately. So big shout out to them. I think often the unsung heroes are the production teams that work on the Word From Us Kids segments and how they make them fun and make them more interactive.
Hi, I'm Carter Loggy, one of the listeners of the Elwood City Limits podcast. If you want to support the podcast, here's some things that could help you. You can listen to the podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. You could also check out their YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Elwood City Limits. That's where I usually listen to the podcast. For social media, there's X, formerly known as Twitter, at ECL Podcasts, Instagram.com/Elwood City Limits. For Twitch streams, it's twitch.tv/Elwood City Limits. There's also Facebook, facebook.com/Elwood City Limits, and Tumblr, elwoodcitylimits.tumblr.com. You can also go to their website, which is elwoodcitylimits.libsyn.com. If the podcast is not on the service you use, just let them know. Finally, pay as little as $1 a month to get bonus content and getting ECL episodes a week early. You can go to their Patreon, which is patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. That's all from me. Let's get back to the show.
And now, back to Arthur.
Okay, Pal and the Big Itch. It's the final dog and baby episode. Let's do this. So this is about Pal, of course, and there's almost not that much of a cold open. It's very orthodox in the sense of, like, it's the inciting incident. So in the cold open, Pal is digging around in the trash outside. He comes inside, he's all covered in garbage and smelly, and then digging in the garbage gives him this itch on the back of his left hind leg. It's this big red spot that he keeps trying to itch, and he's itching it, he's biting at it like a dog would. And Killer warns that it could be the big itch, which is an itch that never goes away.
It's pretty gross.
Yeah, you think so?
Yes. I think that rolling around in garbage and then getting some sort of itch and infection, like a furry infection, again, I'm the one that's around dogs more than you.
That's true.
This is pretty nasty to me. And especially, Arthur doesn't often delve into the world of body horror. There's that infamous Lima Beans episode. There's the lice episode. But it's not often we see wounds or, pestilence portrayed on Arthur.
I guess I wasn't thinking of it as like a wound if it's like an itch, but I suppose it is like a sore. Like in real life, it would be like a sore.
It's like a hot spot, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of gross, especially that he got it in the dumpster. I mean, dogs do as dogs do, but I was like, ew.
Yeah, fair enough. So the big itch is what Pal might be in danger of. So he goes to the vet and comes back with a cone for him to stop biting his leg. Also a bit of psychological trauma because apparently all the other dogs laughed at him when he got his cone put on. So
I actually had this thought the other day.
Oh, yeah?
Whenever you see a dog with a cone, it does feel like the dog is embarrassed.
It is, yeah. There isn't,
and this might be me projecting or adding like a level of personification that dogs aren't capable of. But don't you know what I mean? Like whenever you see a dog with a coat on, they seem embarrassed.
Yes, they seem humbled, perhaps is what I would say.
Yeah.
Of just like they itched or scratched where they shouldn't have, and now this is the consequence they're paying, and now they can't do something that's innately very fun and relaxing for them. So they itched a little bit too close to God's domain, and that is their consequence. So Kate, Killer, and Amigo agree to help Pal through this whole period, which amounts to waiting on him hand and foot, delivering him food, giving him scratches and pets and all that kind of stuff. Killer's part in all this is that she tells everybody about her grandfather, whose name, this wasn't her grandfather, but her grandfather was part of a story involving Fido Carnaboni, a.k.a. the Dog Father. And I just went, oh, brother. And it is exactly what you think. It's a dog and baby, very basic retelling of The Godfather.
Now, I had the exact opposite reaction. I was basically falling asleep. I'm in, totally checked out.
Yeah.
And then they say the Dogfather and the fake royalty-free Godfather theme kicks in.
We've all heard it, yeah. That sound alike.
I jumped to the edge of my chair to see what they do with their Godfather parody. And I will say it's a bit of a missed opportunity because, you want to hear someone do a Marlon Brando with cotton balls in his mouth impression. Come on, folks. That's what we want whenever we get someone to do a Godfather parody. You come to me on the day of my... we know the lines, okay? Leave the gun, take the cannoli, all that stuff. And instead, it's just kind of Killer's voice, barely doing an accent. And I thought it would have been funny if they, I know it's a story that Killer is telling Pal, but it would have been funny if they just went imagination sequence with it and gave all the dogs, separate voice actors and kind of committed to the bit a little bit more instead of just having everybody be Killer voice because they're the one telling the story. I do like how the dog's name is Fido.
Yeah, instead of Vito.
So Or Fredo, right? I know it was you, Fredo.
Fido is the Godfather, so he would be Vito, and there are dog equivalents of Sonny, Fredo, and Michael, and the Michael equivalent is Killer's grandfather.
We're making this sound way better than it is, folks.
Yeah. So,
again, in theory, on paper, I should have been all about this, but it's not really... It's way more loose of a parody than whatever you're picturing in your mind's eye.
Well, and it just kind of felt like we didn't have enough to get to 11 minutes, so, let's spice this up with, hey, it's topical in 2018? The Godfather? Cool. It's just another, hey, Arthur's not above doing parody, and normally it's fine. It's just here, especially when this is the last dog and baby thing, it's just it's one of those movies to reference of just I don't know, I got nothing. The Godfather? Sure. Everybody kind of knows what that is. And I just rolled my eyes at it. But I will say the caricatures of the various actors in dog form, I think at least the character designers had a little bit of fun with that. So that was neat. Pal doesn't get to hear all of this story. And eventually his cone gets taken off and he stops getting special treatment. And the story was the best thing. He wants to hear more of Killer's story. So he pretends to still have his cone on in order to hear more. He kind of positions himself where it looks like he's still wearing it. And Killer's about to tell him about when Fido Carnaboni was, essentially killed, whacked, and they know enough to even reuse the visual metaphor from the Godfather films of the oranges to indicate that he's about to be killed.
Okay, that's one thing I liked, was them kind of going deep with this, where that one's for the adults, that's for us to talk about on this podcast.
Sure.
That's not for any kid, that they had the oranges rolling out.
Pal doesn't get to hear the end of that story, though, because he's found out by Killer, and Killer says that she'll never tell him the rest of the story. Now, Pal decides that in order to hear it again, in order to get the special treatment that he likes, he needs to get another itch. There's a scene transition here to when Pal gets the idea to when he runs outside to go roll in the garbage again, where I just wrote, Pal does DreamWorks face. Thanks a lot, everybody. This whole Pal talking endeavor has led us to him doing DreamWorks face. Thanks for nothing. So Pal rolls around in trash again to try to get the itchy spot back, but it's a rolling garbage can. It actually looks like the green bins that we have here in Nova Scotia, and it rolls down the sidewalk, and Amigo stops the garbage can from rolling by blocking it with his body. But unfortunately, Amigo says he gets a boo-boo on his leg from saving Pal, and that means he gets his own cone. So the episode ends with Pal giving Amigo special treatment. Amigo earlier got Pal some pork chops, so Pal gets him some meatballs, and then proceeds to tell Amigo a story about Perky, who, if you'll remember, all the way back in season 1, is Pal's mom. It's embellished. She tells a little bit about how she's was a circus dog, but it's just to help Amigo pass the time. That's the end. Oh, thank God. Not to show my hand here, but I never want to see these episodes again. You know what I did? As soon as this episode was done, I watched a PAL episode from the first season to just do a little mouthwash for my brain. I watched Sick as a Dog. That's a great episode, and PAL's very cute and acting like a dog in that one. And I don't have to think about these dog and baby episodes ever again. I'm very happy. But before we completely leave them in the dust, Lucas, let's go back. What did you think of Invasion of the Soccer Fans?
As far as these dog and baby episodes go, and they're amongst my least favorite of all the types of episodes in Arthur, I thought that this one tackling the subject of quote-unquote the big game kind of at least gave it an interesting sort of set dressing, I suppose. I mean, the plot of the episode is the same as every other dog and baby plot, which is that, you know, the dog and babies don't understand why the adults do the things they do. There's that kind of misunderstanding, and then eventually they come to a sort of understanding by the end. And there's that extra element of Kate growing up that was kind of introduced in later dog and baby episodes. But this is pretty, it doesn't inspire vitriol for me, but I would say it's fairly unremarkable. And I will say that the dogs get X-Pac heat from me in this episode where, the misunderstanding goes beyond the pale when they destroy the stacks and cause that big ruckus and steal the remote. That's just, like, so annoying. So, I don't know. I feel like at this point, because we're saying goodbye to the dog and baby episodes, I'll almost kind of miss the opportunity to rag on them. We keep a pretty positive show here on Elwood City Limits. Arthur's a great show, so it was always nice to have something to put our hater caps on. But this is, not going out with a bang, but with a fizzle, I would say.
Totally. I mean, that it's with the dog and baby episodes, it really has to be like sub my expectations for me to really, really hate it. In the last episode when we were talking about Bud and those types of characters, like, I think there is more of an ability for me to hate an episode with them because it has a better chance to annoy me. At this point, we've been dealing with these characters for long enough that I'm just like, yeah, whatever. And it's just a bit of a flat line. Invasion of the Soccer Fans, like you yourself mentioned, Lucas, there's a couple of elements within it that are at least a little bit novel that certainly keeps me from disliking it in any way. Like the soccer element, the design, and everything like that. But it just was not... I wasn't engaged watching this. It was just like, oh boy, clocking in at the dog and baby factory again. So yeah, I don't really have that much to say about it. I didn't care for it. And then it was followed up by another one, Pal and the Big Itch. This is another thing where I don't really love the pairing of two character episodes back to back. I always appreciate in Arthur that sometimes in an episode you can get one about Arthur and then one about Arthur's friends, or you get one about DW and then you get one about somebody else. When we're pairing together two of the same, it just kind of makes for a long block of programming that's like, okay, and then we have to do it again. It was the same in the previous episode that we talked about. And it's the same here. I would say Pal and the Big Itch I liked a little bit less just because there is less of it that is novel. And the novel elements, like the Godfather parody, I found like I was rolling my eyes of just like, oh man, I can't believe we're doing this. So I was just waiting for it to be over. But again, I'm sure that the character designers had fun thinking those up. It could be a worse Godfather parody. It could be lazier. They did put a little bit of effort into the names and the likenesses, so there is that. But there really wasn't much for me here. And yeah, I agree with you, Lucas, in that season 21 ends with me going, okay, fine, move on. Like, I'm not so much excited for what's ahead. I'm just like, please put this to rest.
Yeah, Pal and the Big Itch. I gotta say, this is shaping up to be one of the shorter episodes of Elwood City Limits we've recorded.
Yeah, you bet.
And aside from the dog father, there's really nothing to, pardon the pun here, chew on, like dogs do with their bones. There's really nothing to chew on with this episode. Like, the dog father provided us with a little bit of discussion, but really, what else is there to talk about? I'll say that the one benefit is that I guess Killer and Amigo add 2 more characters to these episodes.
Yeah.
Like, before, remember when these episodes were just Pal, Kate, and Nemo?
Or Nadine.
Nadine, they added Binky's little sister.
Yeah.
But it's just like, at a certain point, if you want to make an episode for little kids, let's just see what's going on with DW and her preschool crew.
I agree.
Unlike that Jeff guy we were talking about earlier, I would rather, or what was his name, Jeff? What was that guy's name?
What guy's name?
The guy who had, the guy, the YouTuber who had all the anti-DW.
Oh, the FUDW guy, yeah.
Whatever that guy's name is. Unlike him, I would relish the opportunity to check back in with DW and her and the Tibble twins and see what those guys are up to, because we've hit the wall on the kind of stories we could tell with these dog and baby episodes, and it seems that the writers agreed, because this was the last one.
Yep, so long dog and baby episodes, and now Kate doesn't have to talk anymore, Pal doesn't have to talk anymore, and I couldn't be happier about that specific development. And thank you, everybody, for putting up with us as we make our way through this. And surely there is more good stuff on the horizon, because that's the end of Arthur Season 21. And we have got some big, big changes coming to Arthur the next time we tackle it. But before we preview that, I want to preview what's coming this month on Patreon. Patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. This month, we are returning to kids programming with For the Kids. And I'm going to take advantage of the fact that we are outside of the PBS Kids purview by covering something that, I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of knowledge about. This is not a show that I grew up with, but I know it's something that a lot of our listeners grew up with. And maybe, Lucas, you did too. You'll have to tell me. But I'm eager to learn more about it, and I believe this has even been requested a time or two. I think it's time to cover Bear in the Big Blue House.
We've tackled some Bear in the Big Blue House adjacent shows, but never, the big man in question. So I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah, and I'm very interested to sit down and watch an episode of it and see what everybody likes so much about it. So I'm certainly looking forward to that at the end of July, and hopefully you are as well. Don't forget, if you are a patron, our episode on Smiling Friends is out now for you to listen to. It's an hour long, and it's just great. So patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. Thank you so much for supporting us over there. Next time on Elwood City Limits proper, well, 2 things, of course. Before we hit Season 22, you'll be hearing from us with our ECL season recap. I have a few things to say about this season, and Lucas, I think you may as well. But we will be having our top episodes list as the episode count gets shorter and shorter on these seasons. We'll have to soon make some changes, because next time on Elwood City Limits, we're going to be hitting Season 22. And boy, does that start off with a bang. Not only do we have quite a few changes behind the scenes, but the first episode of Season 22 is Mr. Ratburn and the Special Someone and the Feud. We were talking earlier about Arthur Takes a Stand, how that is one of the more well-regarded newer episodes of Arthur. This is probably one of the most well-known episodes of the show, if not one of the most
How many episodes
popular.
of Arthur made headlines?
True that. In the entirety of Arthur as well, this might be the most well-known episode of the show. So, yeah, we're going to be covering the gay rat wedding next, and I'm really excited.
Yeah, that's right, folks. Head on to X, #GayRatWedding. We're doing it all over again. And I, for one, could not be more excited.
Yep, it's going to be a good time. So we've got the season recap, we've got Gay Rat Wedding coming up, and, of course, Patreon content for you as well. Thank you so much for supporting us on Elwood City Limits. It's been really awesome, and we're getting into the home stretch with Arthur, because these seasons are only going to get shorter and shorter. So until then, my name's Will Young, and for Lucas Mancini,
A strange beastie appeared in the black box, and she succumbed again.
We'll see you next time.
Sounded like something out of Elden Ring.